Check it out. This just released, by the way, like a few days ago, which is why I feel like going over this. Student challenges Ben Shapiro on transgenderism. If it makes them happier, what's the harm? I want to find out, okay? So here's my goal. For one, I think this argument is insufficient. If it makes them happier, what's the harm? I don't think that's a sufficient argument in favor of defending trans people. So I'll be critiquing both ends of the argument here. Let's hear it. I'm ready.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I just had a question about a comment you made at the beginning about transitioning from male to female or
First off the bat, really quickly, and I've said this before while talking about the Shipsters fucking public speech things. The reason why Ben Shapiro looks like a debate god is because he debates anxious college students who are in a hostile environment. So this person, in addition to having a mullet, unfortunately, is also surrounded by people who came to watch Ben Shapiro. In addition, the microphone is being controlled by somebody working for Ben Shapiro. In this environment, it is very unlikely that you are going to be able to produce a good argument. It's very hard. I'm good at debate, and if I was in this environment, it is also unlikely I'd be able to. At any point in time, they can pull the mic away. Ben Shapiro, who has a larger, better microphone in addition to stage presence, could shout me down, or the audience could drown me out. It's very, very, very difficult to make a compelling argument from the position this person is in. Let's take it away.
or otherwise.
Yes.
You've talked a lot tonight about how important it is to let people believe what they want to believe and how the government and us have no say telling people what they should think or what they should be able to say. I just wanted to ask, what's the harm, if somebody's going to be a happier person because they say that they're a man or a woman, like what's the harm in just letting them do it?
I'm not.
Okay, so right off the bat, this is a very weak argument, okay? So if person would feel better saying that they're an elephant, what's the harm in it? Like, this argument leaves out all of the legitimate social, psychological, medical, and philosophical justifications for transness as a concept. It kind of reduces transness down to just be whatever you want. It's not sufficient, And also, additionally, a person isn't saying they're a man or a woman. The real question, if you wanted to phrase it properly while keeping the same basic flow, would be, here, I can do it right here. What is the harm in recognizing people as the gender identity they choose to identify as? That would be like the ba-ba, like the ba-ba. That would be the correct way of going about this. But whatever, let's see what we're going for here.
In favor of government banning people who are adults. Children I'm in favor of banning because now you're talking about somebody who's not capable of consent. Right? All of our laws are based on the ability of people to consent. If you're a child, you can't consent.
Okay, so this is already incredibly stupid, okay? So Ben Shapiro isn't stupid. He knows that gender identity is it's literally a form of identification. Nobody asked anything about transitioning. So he says he doesn't want to ban. No one asked about banning government. Like, this is complete non sequitur. Listen to this.
Banning people.
They say that they're a man or a woman, like what's the harm in just letting them do it?
Question. What's the harm in just letting people identify how they please? Ben Shapiro's answer.
I'm not in favor of government banning people who are adults.
Well, I wouldn't let the government ban it. Nobody asked you. Ben Shipster. By the way, fresh haircut, Ben Shapiro. Credit where credit is due. Fresh cut. It looks good. Okay, moving on.
Children I'm in favor of banning because now you're talking about somebody who's not capable of consent.
Children I'm in favor of banning because now we're talking about people who can't consent. What does that mean exactly? Are we banning children? Are we banning children from identifying a certain way? If there's a 16-year-old trans girl, is the government going to step in and ban No, of course not. What Ben Shapiro is talking about here isn't transness itself, but rather medical transitioning. That's what Ben Shapiro is talking about here. But notice how by immediately jumping to a point that nobody else was talking about, he can ascribe transness as an or medical transition as an intrinsic component of transness. He can conflate these two things. Because children can be trans. A 10 or 11-year-old can sufficiently recognize that they're trans. That's a thing that can happen. But I wouldn't recommend a 10 or 11-year-old get bottom surgery to get their genitals flipped inside out. Those are different things. But by conflating the two, you can condemn all of it by condemning only the sexual reassignment surgery part.
Right? All of our laws are based on the ability of people to consent. If you're a child, you can't consent.
Also, that's not true. All of our laws are not based on the ability for someone to consent. There are tons of things we can do to children, or that children can do, that involve or don't involve consent to different degrees. Like, this is a complete non sequitur as well. Is it illegal to take your child to the dentist? Also, the implication here being that you would force your child to transition? Like this, again, this is a non sequitur. That's 3 points in which Ben Shapiro has, with a single sentence, deviated from the actual question.
So I'm very much in favor of banning gender transition for kids.
See, gender transition. That's what we're talking about right now. Also, people don't generally advocate for sexual reassignment surgery or for hormone therapy for kids. Maybe for like 15 or 16-year-olds or whatever, but what do we mean by kids? It's all ambiguous. But now the audience is thinking about 8-year-olds being forced to have their genitals fucking flipped inside out. That's what the audience is thinking about right now, when the original question was just about trans people.
I think that it's frankly evil. I think you're making decisions for children who are not capable of making decisions for themselves that are permanent and have long-lasting, significant, and severe impact.
Again, the implication here being that you make these decisions for the child rather than the child having a relationship with a doctor and they collectively decide where to move forward from that. All of these points are diversions. They're all deflections. None of these have anything to do with the central questions that were asked.
As far as adults, if you're 25 and you want to get a sex change surgery and you feel like it's going to make you feel better, you have the right to do it. You do. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I mean, the research on this stuff tends to be somewhat conflicting, but if it...
No, really quickly. Oh, no, Ben Shapiro. You shouldn't have made this YouTube video knowing that I, Vosh, would watch it and have contradictory information. So as we go down here to our, let's see, trans people are valid. Gender transition has a positive effect on trans people. Enormous meta-analysis of 56 analyses themselves, indicating a totality of research suggesting that gender transition improves the well-being of transgender people. 52 of the 56 studies indicated that there were overall positive effects. 4 studies indicated mixed or null findings. No studies said that they were harmed by them. Since the release of this document, there's been even more research indicating general positive effects. Though I don't have it in the document, I was linked one that indicated that I believe 97.9% of transgender people who underwent sexual reassignment surgery reported, not sexual reassignment surgery, hormone replacement therapy indicated positive emotional and physiological outcomes from that procedure. So no, not... The evidence on this is in no way, shape, or form controversial or mixed.
It works for you. It works, right? It's a free country. Now, that's really not the question that's being asked in our society today. Because I don't think there are that many people who are like, we want to ban gender surgery for a 30-year-old.
No, again, Ben, nobody here mentioned government banning anything. For one, there are people who say that. But for two, nobody mentioned that. Absolutely nobody mentioned that. He's going on this minute-long tirade to answer a question that nobody asked.
I'm not seeing the campaign for that. What I am seeing is a campaign on the left that says that my child is going to be removed from my home 10 years from now if I don't agree with the left's view of how I should treat my child's gender confusion at age 4.
What the fuck is he talking about right now? The left wants to remove 4-year-olds from the home of people? This is why you should never take Ben Shapiro seriously. He just says stuff. We want to remove 4-year-olds because of the left? No. The most charitable possible interpretation of what he's saying here is that there are licensed doctors who will diagnose gender dysphoria in children, and that sometimes parents will respond to that information by being overtly psychologically or physically or emotionally abusive towards the child with gender dysphoria. And in those instances, sometimes that is classified as child abuse, and in those instances, CPS has the right to take the child away, or the judge can issue a court order to have the kid schlepped over to another parent if there's a divorce or something along those lines. That is a far cry from the left stealing 4-year-olds because they disagree with how the person wanted to handle gender confusion. I don't know what that means. That's not a medical term. Again, he's answering questions nobody asked.
I see the left suggesting that they want to fine me if I refuse to say that a man is a woman as a general proposition.
Nobody has ever what is this? If a man is a woman, explain to me, can somebody point to me any piece of legislation leftists have introduced to fine people for misgendering others? Because I want to remind you guys, really quickly from the law in New York and C-16 in Canada, that the law that fines or makes it unlawful for landowners and business owners to abusively, purposefully misgender trans people only puts trans people in line with the same protections that people get on line of race, gender, ethnicity, marital status, sexuality, and a bunch of other characteristics that fall under the purview of protected classes. All that legislation did was bring trans people in line with the protected classes that already existed, that have existed for a very long time in America. And once again, those laws that protect trans people also protect cisgender people. But Ben Shapiro, unless you're talking in the capacity of a business owner or a landowner, nobody is going to fine you for, as you call it, calling a man a woman.
Right? If I say that men and women are separate, then the left says this is discrimination.
What the fuck men and women are separate? What the fuck does he mean? This video came out a few days ago. This is the great orator of the right? What the fuck do you mean men and women are separate? Like they're separate sexes? Yeah, no shit, they're separate sexes. Like, what the fuck do you mean? Men and women are separate? Yeah, we have two different words. There are two different words for them. They're men and women. What do you mean? Do you mean men and women are intrinsically biologically separate, and that bridge can never be crossed through any social or physiological process? Well, that's inaccurate. But you didn't say that, because all of your arguments are based in making blith generalities that your audience laps up because they interpret the version of that argument that makes sense. Whereas everyone who actually understands these issues can only shake their head in confusion and disappointment because we have no idea what arguments you're meant to be making here, Ben.
Or the left is going to suggest that it has no impact on my business if I employ a woman at Hooters and she shows up the next day as a man.
What the fuck are you talking about? Yeah, this is something the left said. The left, famously known for bringing lawsuits to the managers of Hooters for when they have a female waitress and then she just comes back one day, a man. What do you... like, this feels to me like a child or like a high schooler trying to come up with examples to support their argument, and they don't have any, so they're just like making shit up really quickly. Does he, I guess, transition overnight? Just like overnight, just get the boobies lopped off? I have no... What's happening? Also, Ben Shapiro just said a woman and comes back a man. So is Ben arguing then that he is a man now that he's transitioned? Is there any consistency to the terms being used here? Is there any point to existing at all?
Right, like that does have an impact on my business, right? But the left would suggest, well, you should sort of deal with it. Well,
what the fuck are you talking about? Facts over feels. By the way, let's talk about Hooters waitress overnight transition legal quandaries.
Turns out that gender does mean something, and it does have an actual meaning to people outside of you.
Nobody said that gender doesn't mean anything and that it doesn't have an outside meaning.
I'm not going to go along with the general societal willingness to rewrite basic facets of human nature and human biology, and frankly, mammalian biology.
So this is a nice meme for a variety of reasons. We can go over this point by point because this is the Ben Shapiro argument, okay?
People outside of you. I'm not going to go along with the general societal willingness to rewrite.
So rewrite. He says rewrite as though it's a bad thing. We reinterpret social phenomena. We update our understanding of the world constantly. This is what it means to be an educated person. If your understanding of the world is rooted in some biblical text, like fucking Ben Shippies over here is, you're basically purporting to ignorance. But he doesn't advocate his position from the as I'm the ignorant dumb fuck who won't accept new scientific consensus. He's the facts over feels guy. So he doesn't get to pull this bit. We're complaining about updating. Science updates shit all the time. That's how scientific progress is made. If you have an interest in facts, you have an interest in information being updated to become more consistent with modern, more predictive models of society. So that's one.
Basic facets of human nature.
Basic facet of human nature, except gender is not a basic facet of human nature. Different societies have had different gender interpretations for a very long time. 100 years ago, fucking pink and blue were respectively believed to be masculine and feminine colors. A little while before that, boys and girls up until a given age, usually up until they started developing more noticeable gendered or sexual characteristics, would both wear dresses. A little while before that, and boys were called girls. Girl was a catch-all term for everyone of a young age. You'd become a boy after 3-4 years of age, and you'd become a lady if you were a girl at 3-4 years of age, you know? A boy or a lady. Girl was a gender-neutral term. But if Ben Shapiro back there, he would be like, well, I would be unwilling to change a biological fact of the human experience, something intrinsic to even mammalian. Girls are people of any age or of any gender up to 4 or 5 years of age. That's just a biological fact. That's an immutable characteristic of human nature. The idea of calling a girl only the young child that will later become a lady, this is ridiculous. What then do we call the young girl that would then later become a boy? Do we call them a boy just from birth? That's ridiculous. This is a fundamental rewriting of an intrinsic component of human nature. This goes against everything we understand, and I will not kowtow to the general societal notion of rewriting human nature to appease the feelings of the left. That literally what I just did right there is actually what Ben Shapiro would have done back 300-400 years ago. And it's just as stupid then as it is now. Societies have had different understandings of gender, different ways of describing gender, different numbers of gender for a very, very, very long time. And by the way, so have other animals in the animal kingdom. You want to look it up? There are plenty of species out there that, in spite of having just males and females in a biological sense, the males or the females will be split into different gender roles, essentially meaning that 2 sexes, 3 or more genders, functionally with how they operate. There are lizard species that operate like that, where they have the females and then they have the cuck males and the chad males. I'm not joking. This sounds like a joke, but this is true. So not only is Ben Shapiro wrong about the rewriting part and wrong about the human nature part, he's also wrong about the mammalian animal nature part. Yeah, fish and reptiles do that, ants do that. There are also mammalian species that do that as well.
And human biology, and
human biology, except whoops, ooh, uh-oh, stinky. Gender is not sex. There's nothing biological about gender. Gender is very often associated with certain biological characteristics. That's a fact. That's true. No one would argue that. I mean, generally speaking, people who identify as women tend to have fucking fat pussies and big fucking honkin' boobies, you know? And people who identify as men tend to have gigantic, veiny, throbbing cocks. This is true. No one disagrees with this. Most of them. So there's an association between sex and gender, but that does not mean gender itself is a biological characteristic. There is an association between living in Los Angeles and being a Lakers fan, but that does not mean that the Lakers are a geographical location. Mustn't conflate these things because I value, facts and logic and stuff.
Frankly, mammalian biology.
We already went over why he's wrong on this point.
In order to suggest that a delusion, let's look up the definition of delusion. An idiosyncratic belief or impression that is firmly maintained despite being contradicted by what is generally accepted as reality or rational argument, typically a symptom of mental disorder. Except, wait, if we go to the research document, we will find that basically every reputable psychological and biological organization in the developed world recognizes the existence and validity of trans people. Wow! Look at all of these thousands and tens of thousands of scientists who have dedicated their lives to the study of the human mind, agreeing in consensus that trans people not only exist, but that their transness is a valid component of their identity, not a delusion. Amazing! Wow! I mean, lest I forget, Ben Shapiro's wife is a doctor, so maybe she's holding the fort down on the opposite side of the scale. Wow, amazing. Wait, what was the definition of delusion again? An idiosyncratic belief or impression that is firmly maintained despite being contradicted by what is generally accepted as reality or rational argument. Well, since pretty much every org that comments on the existence of trans people agrees that they're valid, I would consider that to be a reality or rational argument. And let's see, an idiosyncratic belief or impression that is firmly maintained despite being contradicted by reality. Poopy. I don't know about that one, Ben. I don't know about that one. is true. Now, if the best thing for the person is for the person they can't change what they're thinking, there's no way for them to get out of it, they want to change their body so that they feel that it is more in line with what they're thinking, more power to them, that's their problem. And as I've said before, by the way, I've said this 1,000 times and everybody on the left automatically ignores it, of course. I've said that if I were in a room with a transgender person having dinner with that person, I wouldn't go out of my way to call them by their biological sex.
Except you've actually done that before? You've literally corrected yourself on podcasts to make sure you refer to trans people by the pronouns they don't identify as. Also, what does this mean? This just means you're spineless and inconsistent. You've done this on Joe Rogan. You've done this before. What the fuck are you talking about? You've literally done this. And even if you do that, that just means you're inconsistent. If you believe that trans people are delusional and that it's the left, the political correctness is insane, we have to fight back against their rewriting of biological nature, then you would refer to trans women as he and trans men as she every single time. But you don't. You skip out on that when you're talking with your political allies, like when you talk to Blair White, which kind of sort of means that in addition to being wrong, you're also too much of a coward to hold true to your principles. You'll bend over and suck your own dick if it means having to actually agitate your political allies with these principles you claim to hold so dearly in the face of the immutable nature of human biology and, in fact, mammalian biology being overwritten.
It's rude. Right, I wouldn't do that if I were sitting right across from them. But if you're asking me in a public forum whether a man is a man and a woman is a woman...
Nobody asked you that. Everyone believes a man is a man, a woman is a woman. Notice how transphobes always have to run back to these tautological definitions. Nobody is arguing whether... Who is... I have never seen a person on the left say, actually, a man isn't a man and a woman isn't a woman. Tautology is wrong. Nobody has ever said that. The only reason Ben Shapiro comes off even remotely good-looking in these discussions is because he's a master of avoiding the discussion topic and running back to his talking points that repeat syllogisms that make no sense when dissected, but do make a lot of sense if you're a fucking Neanderthal 70 IQ dipshit in the audience, mouth breather, who just came there to listen to your favorite fucking YouTuber turned podcaster talk about how trans people aren't valid.
Or asking me to call a man a woman in a public forum, the answer is no.
Stanford University, by the way. Stanford University. High tier, high quality discourse going on over there. Hey, Ben Shapiro, what's the problem exactly with allowing people to identify as the gender they choose to identify as? Well, the left is always telling me that a man isn't a man and a woman isn't a woman. But I always tell them a man is a man and a woman is a woman. And also, in fact, mammalian nature of biology is being overwritten by the left's language. Like, all right, okay, it's just fucking, please, God. Oh, fuck me, Ben Shapiro. I just wish, what I really genuinely wish is I could, like, find a person on the right that I felt was like an equal, you know? I feel this way about Destiny. Destiny isn't on the right. Destiny is a liberal. But I feel like Destiny is generally, not always, but generally an intelligent and good faith interlocutor. And I disagree with him in a wide variety of ways, but I know that if I debated Destiny, it'd be a good debate. We'd bring out our ideas, we do our best, and we try to challenge each other in our positions, and so on and so forth. These people exist in liberal spaces. They do. They do exist. But on the right, there is literally nothing. It's a void. It's a black hole. All of the best interlocutors, all of the conservative intelligentsia, this is it. Like, Ben Shapiro is like their guy, and that's how he handles questions. By ignoring the central question, going off on a spiel full of buzzwords and talking points he has memorized, answering questions no one asked, and then even managing to be factually incorrect in the talking points that he's using to avoid responding directly to the question posed at him. Like, how do you be that bad? How do you? It's incredible to me. I don't know how you get that bad at this work. It's astonishing.